All right, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Kind of the last minute this evening. We've been working hard over the past 5 days, really around the clock, including the weekend, Saturday, Sunday, starting on Thursday morning all the way through today. So making sure we could get to a point where we felt safe to say when we were at a spot to start school. And so I know everyone, you have the reopening plan, and I'll be covering that in a little bit. But first, I'd like to address a couple other things and talk about some of the things we found since the last time I've talked to you. So again, first and foremost, I want to apologize to our families, our staff, our schools, our bus drivers, our students for the challenges that we faced. You know, the hard part was I've talked to so many parents, families, and people that I know that just said the first day was incredible and their child came home so happy. And, you know, it was just one of those things where they wanted to continue on with that. And so even if they didn't have a bus problem, and I know a lot of them did, even if they didn't have a bus problem, I know we've inconvenienced a lot of kids and families who wanted to be right back in school, and we apologize for that. But I am a believer, very much so. No one wants crisis, but I do believe there is opportunity in crisis and an opportunity to significantly improve and get better what you're doing. And so, you know, I do believe crisis and hardship creates that opportunity. You know, I've said many times that this is the biggest change that we've taken on since the 1970s in JCPS, and it is definitely needed. Although I did feel like mistakes were going to be made, I said that in press conferences throughout the summer. You know, I also know that this was not anticipated, and that's, you know, a mistake on me and on us, as I've said before. But it has given us the opportunity to really dig deep and find some things that we need to do a whole lot better. And so we are going to have some good coming out of that. I will say this, going back to what we are doing is not an option. It's not an option going back to what we were doing before. If we went back to what we were doing, we'd have 750 bus routes with about 600 bus drivers. We would be canceling close to 20% of our routes every day. Which is not tenable. And what would happen is what a lot of districts have had to do, but would be 20% of the routes is for us to say, I'm sorry, you don't get transportation to school today. And that's what would happen. And so going back to that is just not an option for us. Once again, I told you this last week, we have 400 fewer routes than we did 10 years ago. So we had about 950. Now we have about 550 routes. So we're trying to do the same thing, transport kids even more with additional choice and additional district-wide magnets with 400 less routes. And so what we've really found, you know, I'll be quite candid, our systems in transportation and our technology in transportation was extremely antiquated. So we have a lot of great technology in this district, but a lot of it with our technology around transportation was not where it was needed to be. And we didn't have good communication systems for bus drivers, schools, and parents to be informed of any problems or delays. And when we are in a scenario with this many shortage of bus drivers, we have to be able to contact parents, families, schools very well so that they know. And so one of the greatest errors I think we had last week was not having effective communication with families, and we are correcting that. We've also found a few other significant deficiencies that are being corrected right now. When we were given our new routes this summer from Alpha Routes, we've had to add about 5,000 routes to that. And so every time a new student comes in, needs a bus stop, a family requests a bus stop, that's additional stop we need to add, and can even add to routes. But when stops are added to routes, we did not properly add the time that was needed for a bus driver to complete that. And so if it took an extra 10 minutes, that may not have been added to the time of the route. And when you're talking a 2:20 stop time, and you have some delays at the 2:20 stop time, that's obviously going to delay every single time thereafter. We had some room for error in our former schedule. We do not have room for error now. And so number one is getting the times exactly right so we can tell families this is exactly when your bus will be here. It may be late, later than we want it to be, but it is in the reality in which we live right now, and to be able to communicate effectively with families. And if they choose to take another mode of transportation, we want to make sure that they are very clear about the times that we, with our resources, are able to transport them. I told you this, we didn't have strong communication between our schools, our bus drivers, and our command center. A big issue I just talked about, and this should not have happened. We did not have a way for families to know where their child's bus was. That is being corrected immediately. Another big issue, depots. When some many students use depots, meaning they may go to a magnet school and they may take, or a school choice, they may take a bus to a depot, change to another bus, very similar to an airport. What we had done for many, many years is at our depots, our buses all stay there until every bus at the depot arrives. Kids switch buses and then they go. So if one or two buses are 30, 45 minutes late for whatever reason, we have been holding all the buses at that depot, which means every single bus is then delayed at the 2:30 time, the 3:30 time, and the 4:30 time. That was a significant issue that we are now correcting as well. We know that daycare routes weren't door-to-door. That is something we are correcting as well. And we know that just drivers weren't given the time they needed to either know their routes or the appropriate amount of time to complete their routes. So I want to talk about some of our short-term adjustments that we're making, and we're making these immediately. And once again, I say this is around the clock. We're going to need a couple more days to get these instituted. First and foremost, parents will have technology through a mobile app that they can load on their phone. They can register through a link that we will be using, have their child's buses on that link, and they will know exactly where the bus is. They can have notifications as well in the morning and the afternoon, so that if they want to know when their bus is 5 minutes away or entering a neighborhood, they could set an application or a notification for that. And parents will always, we are going to solve one of the main questions or issues I wanted to solve is parents saying, I did not know where my child is. And that is unfair to the parents of this community. That is being corrected. We hope to have that by our first day, which, as you know, is Friday. We're moving that as quickly as we possibly can. But at the absolute latest, that's going to be early next week, that parents will have accessibility to that application on their smartphones to know exactly where their child's bus is. We're going to have JCPS vans and drivers available to take elementary students home and back. And so if a parent is not waiting at the stop, and parents, we would encourage you, help us out with this with our youngest students. Instead of stopping that particular route and sending the child back to school, we will send a bus or a car to that student so that we can meet them and assist them with their family, wait for the family, and then make sure the route continues. The routes must continue throughout it. We cannot return to school. One of the things we have had to really work on is making sure that every single one of our students, this is a first day issue, but it was more significant than in the past. Every single one of our students, elementary, middle, and high, have a clear understanding of their bus or buses and their specific stop. So we had multiple issues of even high school students not necessarily knowing what their stop was, going past it 5 or 10 miles, and then asking the bus driver to return to that stop, which then once again put everyone behind. If it was a depot bus, that exacerbated the problem as well. We're going to have extra buses and vans at our depots, so if one bus or two buses are delayed, we can then use that van or that extra bus to go ahead and take those kids home, and we can keep the buses moving. We're going to have an additional JCPS staff member, we're kind of calling a shoulder buddy, with a cell phone and GPS on the buses for our longest, most challenging routes. We've offered this to our compounds for bus drivers who would request them so that they can sit behind them with GPS. Our ultimate goal is to get GPS for our bus drivers on all of our buses. That would be in real time if a stop is added, but there's some significant technology things we have to work through, and there are very specifics with Kentucky state law about GPS and not having an active screen. We are actively reducing the lengths of routes right now with lots of stops starting in the afternoon, so that when routes have a lot of stops, that just makes it longer. And so taking our routes with the longest amount of stops and reducing those, we're increasing support in our call center. Daycare routes are going to be door-to-door service from this point forward. What happened on Wednesday when it wasn't door-to-door, the bus still had to wait for someone to walk however far it was to get the students. walk them back, so the bus was delayed either way. So we need to make sure that's door to door. I told you about how we're going to retag every student, K through 12, and then all elementary special needs families who need transportation will be called with their information before the first day of school. With our long-term needs, we need to revamp some of our bus routes. Adding 5,000 bus routes to the plan significantly increased the timing that would be needed to complete all of these routes. And so we're going to have to be much more efficient. We plan on working at that through the fall and hopefully making some adjustments at the fall break. But it does take time when you change routes to allow bus drivers to practice routes. You cannot just change a route and say, go do that route. They have to have time to practice that and everyone to be informed. We're going to expand the offerings for the application for families and schools. Our ultimate goal, our long-term goal would be that our students have some type of device or key fob, so to speak, on it when it registers as soon as they walk on the bus, and it takes them off as soon as they get off the bus. So a parent can not only track the bus, but whether their student is on that bus or not. That is a long-term fix, but it's an important technology that we want to use. Obviously, we're going to continue to recruit bus drivers, work to increase pay, work to make sure our bus drivers have everything they need to be successful. As the current trend continues, we will continue to have more and more problems throughout this nation unless we address our significant bus driver issue. And so here's how the reopening is going to work. You got this information. We wanted to do it in 2 days so that we could make some adjustments. Once again, we have to make sure that we have a couple more days to clean up the last of our routes. One thing we want to make sure parents know clearly what time their child will be arriving home. Once again, I'll say this, these will be first days again, so they could be a little more delayed than at other times, but hopefully all parents will have that application by that time so they can see where that bus is. On Friday, August 18th, which is this Friday, all elementary and middle school students will return to school. We will then have the weekend to make any adjustments. And then on Monday, August 21st, we'll bring all of our high school students back. So by next Monday, all of our students will be back in session. Friday, once again, elementary and middle. Monday, all 3 levels will be back for the rest of the year. I want to note, students at our multi-level schools will return back with their specific level. So for instance, Marion C. Moore has a middle school and a high school. The middle school students would return on Friday. The high school students would return on Monday. All state agency schools return on Friday as well. And we're announcing all JCPS staff report back to work tomorrow, Tuesday, August 15th. I do want to say this to our families again. This was our mistake. We're going to do as much as we possibly can to forgive days that were missed. That is our Board of Education who makes that decision. Once again, there's a state law requiring a certain amount of seat hours, so we may take some faculty-only days later in the year, convert those into student days, but our goal will be not to extend the school year into the summer as a result of this. But our board will be making that decision later, and a lot will be determined by the amount of winter weather we get as we get into the winter months. A couple other announcements I want to make. Meal sites are going to be open Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. We had about 1,000 people receive meals today. Those will be open Tuesday and Thursday. Immunizations and physical clinic Tuesday 9 to 3 at Iroquois High School, so hope our kids can take advantage of that. We also have a list of daycares who are offering JCPS families assistance while school is out. It's on our website. Also want to thank several businesses and organizations who have stepped up to assist. We had talked about UPS before, but the Louisville Zoo, Jefferson Memorial Forest, Frazier Museum, and many others have stepped up to assist. I just want to really take this last couple minutes and assure students, families, bus drivers, other school staff, students in our community that we hear you. We are doing everything we can to make this right, and we are going to make this right. And thanks to the overwhelming majority who have understood that, yes, we made mistakes, but we've owned up to them and we're going to fix them. On a personal level, I have to say, I've gotten a lot of feedback over the past 5 days, as you can imagine. Some of it's tough feedback to get, which I own and I accept, but I also want to thank all those who have reached out to me with an incredible amount of support, hundreds and hundreds of people inside the JCPS community and outside. I have not had the opportunity to respond to all of you, but I want you to know your words have meant a great deal to me. Once again, students had an awesome first day of class. I know they're going to have an awesome second, third, and fourth day of class, and we're going to get into a routine starting next week and be right back at it. So I'm excited at the end of this week to get our kids back in class and have a great year for the 23-24 school year. Happy to take any questions that you have.
Superintendent Pollio, we've heard from a lot of bus drivers that their biggest concern is that their compound is nowhere near where their routes go. So for example, they're in a compound that's in the east end and their first stop is over in the west end. Have you guys looked into addressing that or making any changes to the routes so bus drivers are driving in areas they know and are familiar with?
Yeah, so I met with bus drivers and I told them clearly redoing all the routes in a 4 or 5 day period is not an option. I mean, that's just not an option. There are some times where that's a better efficiency. And so I want to say this, when we mirrored, sometimes when a would leave and go to another area of town to drop students off and then go all the way back to that area of town to pick up another group of students, led a whole lot of delays last year where students and staff were in schools till 6 and 7 o'clock at night. You all probably heard of that last year. It would have been worse this year. We are going to try to minimize that when we do our long-term planning. Like I said, over fall break, that is not something that is just an overnight fix. But we are looking into that significantly.
Where are you going to find the people that, okay.
Whoever.
So adding 5,000 routes after the routes, or adding 5,000 stops after the routes were already created, I mean, that seems like a very preventable error. When you do AI, you have to have all the data points in to create a system that works. Did Alpha Route sign off on that? Or did they work with you guys with these 5,000 routes, or were the stops, or were those just approved by JCPS folks?
They were approved by that's the way we've done it in the past. And I mean, you know, I can't get into the specifics of what sign-off meant and didn't. I wish I could answer that for you, Jess. But, you know, I think what we had was we should have had better communication with Alpha Routes about what we could do, what we could add, what we couldn't add, and what we should be doing. I'll tell you this, it would be a lot easier for me to stand up here and just say it was Alpha Routes' fault. That's not the case. You know, I'm not saying that, you know, I think working with them on implementation should have been something that we did and they did with us more, so that we were hand in hand when we were adding these stops. But, you know, we have to own our own mistakes, and I can't just put it on Alpha Routes.
Okay. Thank you. When we talk about the shoulder buddies on the buses, where are we going to find these folks, and how much money are we going to spend on those positions?
Well, once again, I mean, these aren't going to be permanent because, you know, these we'll pay extra for those that volunteer to do it. We need about 75 of them. So it's not a huge number of bus drivers who requested it. Most of the bus drivers told me they knew where they were going. It was just a matter of efficiency. But we do have some that didn't, and that held up the system. So what we're talking is about an hourly 75 for about 2 weeks. But once I can't give you an exact number, Krista, but I can tell you that you know, we're not talking a substantial sum when we're only talking about 2 weeks. Really what happens in most years, which we need to get to, is where bus drivers know their kids know their stops, parents understand where the bus is, and then the efficiencies begin to get better. Which also in this, we have a lot of stops right now that may not have kids attached to them because a kid moved or went somewhere else, but the bus still has to stop there because it's considered a stop, and we will be deleting those in the couple of weeks to come. So efficiency should improve greatly.
We learned today that there are 2 main either dynamic ideas or Alpha Route contracts, one from the summer of 2021 and one from November of 2022. We had been led to believe that the routes that we're currently dealing with were the result of the November 2022 contract. So then if that's true, what was the result of the first contract? What did you get from the first contract?
I think, as I recall, I can't answer that specifically. We were working on efficiencies with our system. So we had gone from, well, like I said, 950 bus routes down to about 650 bus routes. That's hard, guys. I mean, it's hard for me to express how challenging it is for the transportation team to go from 950 routes to 650 routes and provide all the same services that we did. And I want to reiterate, when we add a district-wide magnet, whether that be Manual or Mail or Du Bois, which was added, Grace James, that means we transport to every corner of the district if a child is in that. So, you know, we don't have the ability or the in-house ability to just cut 300 routes and try to keep all of the same services that we are providing. I addressed this last week, but we're in a situation, not just here, but nationally, where we're going to have to start making decisions about who we transport, when we transport, who we don't transport. Because going from 950 to 650 in a few short years is nearly impossible. And so that is the majority of the work that I believe happened with the first contract.
Sir, over the weekend, did you spend time talking to bus drivers? And if so, how's their morale?
You know, I mean, I'll say this. I mean, the bus drivers, you know, they're great people. They're great workers. They expressed to me, I mean, frustration clearly from the first day. I would never say that there was not a great deal of frustration, mostly because of the things I said we need to help them with. You know, there's a language barrier. We have 17,000 English language learners now. And so many times that's a barrier that bus drivers aren't able to assist with when they're helping. Most of them, almost all of, I mean, nearly everyone I talked to said, we understand we got to get them back to school. We understand that, just help us out. And so what I told them was we'd be providing short-term answers for them. We got to get kids back in school. We got to get our kids the services they need, but we're also going to provide some long-term answers, and so we need them to stick with us through that.
With the first high school football game being on Friday, August 18th, and high school students going back to school on Monday, August 21st, how will this new start day impact or affect athletics?
It won't. They will be still playing, so they're practicing right now. The first day we did not, Thursday, just to give us an opportunity to, sometimes we got to get, you know, when we make a decision like that at 4 in the morning, we need the opportunity to come together as a team and make the right decision. But since that next day, last Friday, they've been able to practice and play. So all of our teams, I believe, probably are playing right now. I think you have some playing now. You'll have definitely some sports playing tomorrow and throughout the rest of the week.
So these vans and drivers that will take kids home if their adult isn't at the bus stop, is that going to be, are they going to be in a certain place, and if the bus driver gets to a stop, do they call them, and then does the bus just wait there for them to get there? How is that going to work?
So they'll be located at compounds around the district so that it's not, you know, we want them to be close to wherever that is. Right now, we're working through exact specifics. Our goal will be to tell the bus driver to continue on with the route, and the van would meet them in 2 or 3 stops to pick them up. We want to do everything possible to keep the routes marching on and moving, and that is really was one of the major issues, and I heard that from bus drivers too, is if I have to take a kindergartner back all the way to school from where we came from, and that's 5, 10, 15 miles, that adds 15 miles there, 10 miles there, 10 miles back, you're adding 20 minutes to the route, and that just compounds throughout the day, so that was a big issue.
Dr. Pollio, thanks for all the work that you've been doing these last few days. I know it's been very stressful for you, but Alpha Routes in town, how many people from their team are here, and what kind of takeaways can we get from the work that you guys have been doing since they've been in town? When are they returning, and will this cost any more money?
No, they're not. It will not, and they're on the ground right now. I believe 4 personnel from Alpha Routes are with us right now, helping us really. What we're asking them to do is to look at the efficiency and to get the correct times for all of our routes with the additional stops that we have added. And so that's really, guys, the hard part. We want to make sure every student gets a stop, but you know, making sure all of those we add those stops in, and that increases time. And so what we really want to have and contact parents, especially any bus that may have to be after like a 6:30 or a 6:45 time period, is that we're very clear with our families that this is the stop time we are able to provide with the resources that we have. And so, yes, if it is 7:15, because of the amount of kids we are having to transport and stops, we want to tell families that. We want them to be able to see it on a map. And yes, you may report that the last bus got there at whatever time, but we want to make sure that it's not a repeat of last Wednesday where every family knows exactly where they are. So those are the things they're working on for us right now.
I believe I heard you say that you're looking at removing stops on the longest routes. I think that makes sense that that would be needed, but I've heard from so many parents who said, I don't have a stop or I don't know where mine is. So is removing stops on the longest routes, is that going to create new issues?
So that may be adding another bus and splitting up a route that has 28 stops into 14 too. That does not mean we're saying that stop is disappearing. We are saying we need to find other ways in order to make that work. And so that may be a second bus. And so we've contracted with Miller Transportation for a total right now of about 20 buses. We asked for as many as the more that we can get, the better. We did that last year as well, but though we have those buses beginning available at the end of the week. And so that may be taking one of the Miller buses and having 14 stops and 14 stops instead of 28 stops. So it's not eliminating stops, no.
Do you know how many drivers have quit, resigned, put in early retirement notice, anything of that nature since Wednesday? And also, what is this technology that you're planning to have parents, be able to track the buses where their kids are?
Yeah, so first, I'm not aware, no, as I reported on Friday, we had not had any that had resigned or quit. I'm not aware of any today. But I wouldn't, if you have an example of somebody, I can't say that didn't happen today. But as of now, the answer to that is zero, to my knowledge. I'm sorry, I don't have the exact app name, but it is an app that a lot of large districts use across the nation that allows a parent to use their parent credentials to sign into the app. They would go in and then select the buses that their child is on. We will provide them help if they need it. They can then set up the notifications and then the specific app. And we're working through T-Mobile is who we are working through. We have a contract with T-Mobile for a lot of services around technology, and they're assisting us with this. And so they're another example if someone just reached out and said, let us help you out. But it will be an app. We'll have more information on that in the next couple days, the exact information about the app. But what it will show is a bus on a map. If a parent has a child at Blankenbaker and Taylorsville Road, or that's where we can say that, and the school will have that too. So if a parent doesn't have a smartphone, instead what they were calling the school didn't know where the bus was. This was some of the antiquated communication systems we had, and we're trying to radio the bus, and the frequencies were all jammed up because of the amount of traffic on the first day when it comes to radio frequency. And so now they can call the school, any parent can call the school because the school will have access to the GPS, and they can say, no worries, your bus is at this location headed your way. And so that's a big thing too for our families.
I talked to a couple of families who say their stop that they are initially assigned was didn't make any sense, like it was 12 miles away or something like that. Is there any sense that there was a disconnect between what parents entered in that Google form and what was transferred to the system that created the routes?
I think that's possible. I think it's probably, I don't know the specifics on that, Jess. We did find a lot of situations where the exact address was not entered. So if it was north or east or west or an apartment number, it may not have been entered exactly right. I'm sure there were mistakes in that. I'm not saying there weren't mistakes. I'm not familiar with that. We have been working very hard to make sure that parents have bus stops, starting with our youngest students, obviously. Now, I want to say this is an issue every single year because the amount of kids who move over the summer or become new to the district that we don't have entered in our system for a bus stop. And so that has been an issue for years. We have less actually this year than we've ever had before in that. But we're addressing that and some of the safety issues of stops that have been notified as well.
Will early childhood students still start next Wednesday, August 23rd as planned?
Yeah, we're looking at that. We're using early childhood buses to do some of this work, so there is a potential for that to be delayed. We haven't made that decision yet.
Sir, I know you talked about general busing issues for all kids, but have you faced any special needs busing issues for special needs kids?
You know, I think one of the things, making sure that all of our schools had the exact correct data for special needs buses, and families had the exact data, the time they were going to be picked up, the bus that was coming. I think we had some issues with that. I can't speak individually to them, but to my knowledge, we had some of those issues, and that's why I said we want to make sure that we contact all families with that transportation before the first day so that they know exactly what we're providing. Great. Thank you, guys. Appreciate your time.